Hi, we're Katie and Elijah Bowers. No, we're Elijah and Katie Bowers, aren't we? Hey, we're Elijah and Katie Bowers, and we are Glory Church, and we're so excited to be launching this church in Parkersburg, West Virginia. Just a little bit about us. We were both raised in church. I was barely ever missed a Sunday, and just as I just didn't believe in God, and I got farther and farther away from God, and eventually I just got to the point where I was in the middle of a suicide attempt. And it was nothing but the presence of the Lord that night that walked in right in the middle of that attempt and stopped me from taking my life. And it just a little while later, I end up in a church altar, just in a radical encounter with the glory of God. And I remember getting up from that, and I thought, I didn't know that this existed. I've been in church and I've done all this stuff, but I didn't know this was real. And there's all these other people out here just like me that they think they know if God's real, and they think they've experienced church, but they don't know what I just found out. And so that just led me to this place. Literally 3 days later, I'm on the streets, reading scriptures with people, hey, you need to know Jesus, and that led me into this journey that eventually I was preaching, and we did tent revivals and led worship and just did all kinds of things. And for a long time, I was just really satisfied with that. I was giving people the encounter with God that I had, until I realized that when I left town, people were just being dropped. They weren't discipled, they weren't cared for, they weren't reached out to. And when I started to see people aren't making it, I was we got to fix this. We got to change the script. Here's what we'll do. We'll just go into one city and we'll pastor a church. We'll have the encounters. We'll win the souls, and then we'll walk with them until they can be strong enough to stand on their own. And so I just began to cry out to God, God, call us to pastor, because we have to do this. So and then you had that terrible experience. You almost died.
After giving birth to our second child, our son Elisha, I began to hemorrhage immediately after delivery. The nurses and the doctors were running around everywhere, and nothing was working until I began to call on Jesus. And that day, I didn't sound like preacher Katie. I didn't sound like worship leader Katie. I sounded like a child, a weak child, calling on her father in desperate need of help. And the Lord intervened and came in and performed a miracle. And even the doctor herself said, this was not the medicine. This was the Lord. This was a miracle of the Lord that saved your life. After that, I had weakness in my body. I'd lost mass amounts of blood. But this woke up this desire for support and community inside of me. And I had been so strong and so independent for so long. I turned out and I was alone. I didn't have anybody. And I see now, after having, 2 more kids after that, my last baby, I went through a really dark place of postpartum depression, and just constantly remembering I'm isolated and I am alone, and I want community and I want support, that I have an overwhelming desire now to be that for somebody. I want everybody to have somebody, because no matter if we want to acknowledge it or not, we're all weak, and we all need our hands lifted up, just like Moses was. Moses was a great and a strong leader, but when it came to the time of the fight, he needed someone to lift up his arms. That's our heart for Glory Church. We want them to encounter Jesus. We want everyone to encounter Jesus, but we also want them to feel our arms holding them up in the middle of their fight, because no one should be alone.
Yeah, absolutely. So September 20th, come see us, Parkersburg, West Virginia.